I found a dusty box in my attic, filled with letters from 1863, written by a girl named Eliza. Her words were meant for someone special, but they were lost for decades. Who received them? And why did they resurface now? Stick around to uncover a mystery that spans generations and tugs at the heartstrings. In the summer of 1863, I was just 16, sitting at my wooden desk in a small Virginia town. My name was Eliza, and I poured my heart into letters, scribbling dreams and fears by candlelight. The Civil War raged outside, but my world was this paper and ink. I wrote to my cousin, Sarah, who lived far away in Boston. Each letter felt like a lifeline, a way to hold on to hope. I described the blooming dogwoods, the fear of distant cannon fire, and my longing for peace. I imagined Sarah reading my words, her smile warming the cold distance between us. I sealed each letter with wax, my fingers trembling with emotion. I sent them off, trusting they'd reach her. But as the war dragged on, I stopped hearing back. I wondered if my letters ever found her. The silence gnawed at me, but I kept writing. Those letters were my way of surviving the chaos. They were my voice in a world falling apart. Years passed, and I grew up in a fractured nation. The war ended, but my letters to Sarah never resumed. I often thought of her, wondering if she'd moved on or if my words had been lost. I married, had children, and life pulled me forward. Yet, those letters lingered in my mind, like ghosts of my younger self. I'd written about my dreams of teaching, of seeing a world beyond my town. I'd shared secrets I couldn't tell anyone else. Sometimes, I'd sit by the window, imagining Sarah holding my letters. Did she ever read them? Were they tucked away in some forgotten drawer? I had no answers, but I held on to the hope that they mattered. My children grew, and I told them stories of the war. I never mentioned the letters, though. They felt too personal, too raw. Life moved on, but those words remained a piece of me. By 1880, I was a mother and a teacher, living a quiet life. The letters were a distant memory, buried under years of routine. One day, a stranger knocked on my door, holding a bundle of papers. He said he'd found them in an old trunk in Boston. My heart raced. They were my letters, yellowed and fragile. I recognized my handwriting, the loops of my youthful script. The stranger explained he'd bought the trunk at an auction. He didn't know Sarah, but he'd traced the letters back to me. I held them, feeling the weight of those lost years. Why had they never reached her? I read one, my voice cracking as I spoke my own words. The stranger left, and I sat alone, lost in 1863 again. Those letters were a time capsule of my heart. I wondered who else might find them one day. I kept the returned letters in a wooden box under my bed. I couldn't bear to read them all. Each one brought back the war's shadow. But sometimes, late at night, I'd pull one out. I traced the words, remembering the girl I was. I wrote of hope, of love, of a future I barely believed in. I wondered what Sarah's life had become. Had she married? Moved away? I asked around, but no one knew. The letters felt like a conversation cut short. I told my daughter, Mary, about them one evening. Her eyes lit up, fascinated by the idea of words traveling through time. I let her read one, and she asked why I stopped writing. I didn't have an answer. The letters were a reminder of a world I'd left behind. I tucked them away again, hoping they'd find their purpose. Decades later, in 1900, I was an old woman, my hair gray, my hands unsteady. The letters still sat in their box, untouched for years. Mary, now grown, asked if she could have them. She said they were a piece of history, of me. I hesitated but gave her the box. She promised to keep them safe. I told her about Sarah, about the bond we'd shared through those letters. Mary listened, her eyes soft with understanding. She said she'd try to find Sarah's family. I smiled, though I doubted she'd succeed. The world had changed so much. Telephones, railroads, new cities. My letters felt like relics from another era. Still, Mary's determination warmed me. Maybe my words would find a new home. Mary spent years searching for traces of Sarah. She wrote to libraries, churches, even distant relatives. I watched her, proud but skeptical. The letters had been lost once. Why would they matter now? One day, she came to me, her face glowing with excitement. She'd found a woman in Boston, a granddaughter of Sarah's. Her name was Clara, and she wanted to meet me. I was stunned. Sarah had a family, a legacy. Clara had heard stories of a cousin who wrote letters during the war. Mary arranged for Clara to visit. I felt nervous, like I was 16 again. What would Clara think of my words? Would they mean anything to her? The day she arrived, I clutched the box tightly. This was my chance to finish the story. Clara was kind, with eyes that reminded me of Sarah. She held the letters gently, as if they were treasures. I watched her read, her fingers tracing my faded ink. She told me Sarah had spoken of me often, but never mentioned letters. The war had disrupted mail, and Sarah assumed I'd stopped writing. Clara read aloud, her voice steady where mine would have faltered. She laughed at my stories of chasing fireflies, cried at my fears of loss. I felt exposed but connected. These words, written decades ago, were alive again. Clara said they helped her understand her grandmother. I realized my letters had found their reader, just not the one I'd expected. That night, I slept peacefully, my heart full. My words had traveled through time. Clara took some letters back to Boston, promising to share them with her family. I kept a few, unable to let them all go. Mary suggested we donate them to a local museum. I resisted at first. Those letters were mine, private. But Mary convinced me they could inspire others. I agreed, and the museum displayed them in a glass case. Visitors read my words, strangers I'd never meet. I visited once, seeing people pause at my letters. It felt strange, like I was sharing my soul with the world. But it also felt right. Those letters, born in war, now told a story of resilience. I wondered what Sarah would think, seeing her name in a museum. I hoped she'd be proud. The museum curator called me one day, saying a historian wanted to publish my letters. I was hesitant. Would people care about a girl's thoughts from 1863? The historian visited, a young man with a kind smile. He said my letters captured the human side of the war. They weren't about battles or generals, but about hope, fear, and family. I agreed to let him publish them. When the book came out, I held it, my name on the cover. I read it, feeling like I was meeting Eliza again. The book reached people across the country. Letters arrived, thanking me for sharing my story. I was amazed. My words, once lost, now touched lives. I felt Sarah's presence, like she was reading over my shoulder. As I neared the end of my life, I thought often of those letters. They'd outlived me, carrying my voice into the future. I imagined children reading them in schools, historians studying them. My words had become a bridge between past and present. I was grateful for Clara, for Mary, for the stranger who found the trunk. They'd given my letters a second life. I hoped they'd inspire others to write, to share their stories. The world was changing fast. Automobiles, electricity, new wars. But my letters proved that words could endure. They could connect hearts across decades. I closed my eyes, content, knowing I'd left something behind. My letters were my legacy, a gift to the future. Years after my death, in 1920, my letters were still in the museum. Mary visited often, checking on their condition. She told me once, in a dream, that they were teaching children about the war. I smiled, imagining young eyes reading my words. The museum added a plaque with my name, Eliza, and a brief story of the letters. People left notes, saying my words moved them. I wished I could see it, but I felt it in my heart. The letters had become more than mine. They belonged to everyone. Historians cited them in books, piecing together the war's human toll. I'd never imagined my thoughts would matter so much. Each letter was a snapshot of a girl navigating fear and hope. I wondered if Sarah Spirit knew her granddaughter had found me. I like to think she did. By 1930, the world was different. Radios, skyscrapers, a new century's pulse. My letters remained, though, a quiet constant. A teacher wrote to the museum, saying she used them in her classes. Students wrote essays about my life, imagining who I was. Some thought I was brave, others saw my fear. Both were true. I'd written those letters to survive, to feel less alone. Now, they helped others understand a time they'd never know. The museum hosted a talk about my letters, inviting Clara's children. They spoke of Sarah, of how my words filled gaps in their family story. I felt a warmth, knowing my letters had brought us together. They were a thread, weaving through generations. I hoped they'd keep weaving. In 1940, another war gripped the world, and my letters found new meaning. Soldiers wrote home, just as I had, their words carrying love and fear. A newspaper published one of my letters, calling it timeless. Readers wrote back, saying they felt my words in their bones. I was gone, but my voice wasn't. The museum saw more visitors, people seeking connection in uncertain times. My letters reminded them that humanity endured, even in chaos. Clara's daughter, now grown, donated a photo of Sarah to the museum. It sat beside my letters, her face finally real to me. I wished I could have known her then. My letters had outlasted us both, but they kept us close. They were our shared heartbeat. By 1950, my letters were part of history lessons across the country. Teachers used them to show the war's impact on ordinary lives. I was no general, no hero, just a girl with a pen. Yet my words resonated, simple and honest. A filmmaker contacted the museum, wanting to tell my story. They made a short documentary, using actors to read my letters. I imagined myself watching, blushing at the attention. The film won an award, and more people discovered my words. Clara's grandchildren attended the premiere, proud to be part of it. I felt a surge of gratitude for them. My letters had become a legacy I'd never planned. They spoke for every girl who wrote through fear, hoping to be heard. In 1963, a century after I wrote those letters, the museum held a special exhibit. They called it Eliza's Letters, a voice from the Civil War. Thousands came, drawn by the story of a girl and her lost words. The exhibit included my letters, Sarah's photo, and Clara's memories. People left flowers, notes, even their own letters. I felt their love, their connection to my story. A young girl wrote that she wanted to be a writer because of me. My heart swelled. She was like me, dreaming through words. The exhibit traveled to other cities, spreading my story further. I realized my letters had become a mirror, reflecting hope across time. They were no longer just mine. They belonged to the world. By 1970, my letters were in textbooks, studied alongside famous speeches. I was stunned. A girl's private thoughts, now part of history. Scholars analyzed my words, looking for clues about the war. They debated my feelings, my choices, my silence after the war. I wanted to tell them it was simpler. I wrote to feel alive. A university invited Clara's great-grandchildren to speak about me. They shared stories passed down from Sarah, about our childhood together. It felt like a reunion across time. My letters had kept us connected, even in death. I hoped they'd inspire others to write their truths. The world was louder now, televisions, protests, change. But my quiet words still found ears. In 1980, a writer used my letters as inspiration for a novel. She imagined my life beyond what I'd written. I laughed, seeing myself as a character, bold and adventurous. The novel became a bestseller, and my name reached new readers. Some visited the museum, curious about the real Eliza. They read my letters, their eyes tracing my fears and dreams. I felt exposed but honored. The writer sent a copy of the book to the museum, signed with thanks. I wished I could thank her back. My letters had sparked something new, a story beyond my own. Clara's family attended the book's launch, their pride warming me. My words had grown wings, flying far beyond 1863. By 1990, the internet was emerging, and my letters found a new home online. The museum digitized them, making them free for anyone to read. People from across the world sent emails, sharing how my words touched them. A girl in England said she wrote letters to her grandmother because of me. A soldier in a far-off war said my fear mirrored his. I was amazed. My words, written in candlelight, now glowed on screens. The museum created a website, Eliza's Letters, with my story and Sarah's. Clara's great-great-grandchildren helped build it. I felt their love, their care for my legacy. My letters were no longer bound by paper. They were everywhere, connecting hearts. In 2000, a school named a library after me, the Eliza Collection. They filled it with books about the Civil War and my letters. Students held readings, performing my words like a play. I imagined myself there, blushing at their voices. The library hosted an annual event, inviting people to write letters to loved ones. They called it Eliza's Day, a celebration of connection. I felt honored, my name now a symbol of hope. Claire's descendants attended, sharing stories of Sarah and me. The letters had become a bridge, linking past to present. I wondered how far they'd travel. The world was vast, but my words felt boundless. They carried my heart to places I'd never seen. By 2010, my letters were part of a global project on war and memory. Scholars from different countries studied them, comparing my words to others. They said my letters showed the universal need to connect. I was just a girl writing to her cousin, but they saw something bigger. A museum in Europe displayed my letters alongside others from different wars. Visitors left messages, saying my words gave them hope. I felt a quiet pride. My simple act of writing had touched lives. Clara's family, now scattered across the world, stayed connected through my story. They emailed the museum, grateful for its work. My letters had become a thread, tying humanity together. I hope they keep inspiring. In 2020, the world faced a pandemic, and my letters found new resonance. People were isolated, writing letters again to feel close. A news outlet shared my story, calling me a voice for uncertain times. They quoted my letters, my hopes shining through the war's darkness. Readers responded, saying they felt less alone. The museum saw a surge in online visitors, all reading my words. A teacher created a virtual lesson, using my letters to teach empathy. I was moved, my words, written in fear, now comforted others. Clara's great-great-grandchildren shared my story on social media. It spread, connecting people across borders. My letters were a reminder. Words could heal. I wished I could see the world they touched. By 2023, my letters were part of a podcast series, Voices from the Past. Each episode featured a letter, read by actors with music in the background. Listeners wrote reviews, saying my words felt alive, like I was speaking to them. The podcast won awards, and my name reached new ears. I imagined myself listening, amazed at the sound of my own heart. The museum partnered with schools, sharing my letters with students worldwide. A girl in Japan wrote a letter to her friend, inspired by me. I felt a spark of joy. She was carrying my legacy forward. Clara's family listened to the podcast, proud of our shared story. My words had found a new rhythm, beating in modern hearts. In 2025, the museum celebrated the 162nd anniversary of my first letter. They held a global event, streaming readings of my words. People from every continent joined, sharing their own letters. I was overwhelmed. My simple act had sparked a movement. The event raised funds to preserve historical letters, keeping other voices alive. Clara's descendants spoke, their voices carrying Sarah's memory. They said my letters showed the power of connection. I agreed, though I'd never imagined this impact. My words, written in 1863, now inspired a world I couldn't fathom. They were proof that love, hope, and fear could echo forever. I felt complete, my story alive in every reader. The museum launched a new exhibit, Letters Through Time, featuring mine alongside others. They used technology to let visitors write virtual letters, sent instantly to loved ones. I loved the idea, my letters inspiring new ones. People shared stories of reconnecting with family, inspired by my words. A young boy wrote to his grandmother, saying he felt like me, reaching across distance. The exhibit traveled globally, spreading my story further. Clara's family helped curate it, their dedication humbling me. My letters were no longer just paper, they were a call to connect. I hoped they'd keep inspiring, long after 2025. The world was vast, but words made it small. I was grateful to be part of it. A university created a course, Eliza's Letters, Writing History. Students analyzed my words, exploring their context and impact. They wrote their own letters, reflecting on their lives. I was touched, a girl's thoughts, now shaping minds. The course included a project where students sent letters to strangers, inspired by me. Responses poured in, creating new connections. The museum shared these stories online, linking them to my letters. Clara's descendants visited the class, sharing our family story. I felt proud, my words sparking learning and love. The students called me a hero, but I was just a girl with a pen. My letters had become a lesson in humanity. By 2030, my letters were in virtual reality, letting people step into 1863. They saw my desk, my candle, my world. Users said it felt real, like I was there with them. The experience included my letters, read in my voice, or what they imagined it to be. I was amazed. Technology had brought me to life. People wrote virtual letters, sharing them in a digital archive. Clara's family helped design the experience, ensuring my story stayed true. The project won awards, spreading my words further. I felt like I was still writing, still connecting. My letters were no longer bound by time or space. They were everywhere, touching hearts in ways I'd never dreamed. In 2040, a new generation discovered my letters through a global archive. Schools used them to teach empathy, history, and writing. A girl in Africa wrote a letter to her sister, inspired by me. She said my words made her feel brave. I was moved. My fears had given her strength. The archive included stories from others, all inspired by my letters. Clara's descendants, now elders, shared their pride in our legacy. The museum updated its exhibit, adding interactive screens to show my letters' journey. People left messages, thanking me for my voice. I felt eternal, my words a spark for new stories. I hope they'd keep burning bright. By 2050, my letters were part of a global peace initiative. Leaders used them to show the human cost of war, urging unity. My words, written in fear, now inspired hope for peace. A summit featured my letters, read by children from different nations. Their voices gave me chills, carrying my heart across centuries. The initiative created a Letters for Peace campaign, encouraging people to write. Millions joined, sharing stories of love and resilience. Clara's family, still connected to my story, led local efforts. I was proud. My simple act had grown into a global call. My letters were a reminder. Words could change the world. I felt my purpose fulfilled. In 2063, 2 centuries after I wrote those letters, they were still alive. A space station had a library, and my letters were there, read by astronauts. They said my words reminded them of Earth's fragility. I was stunned. My thoughts, written by candlelight, now in the stars. The museum, now a global institution, preserved my letters in a climate-controlled vault. People visited, leaving digital notes of gratitude. Clara's descendants, now a vast family, celebrated my legacy. My letters had become a symbol of connection across time and space. I felt like I was still writing, still reaching out. My words were a gift, eternal and boundless. As centuries passed, my letters remained a beacon. They were taught, shared, and loved in ways I'd never imagined. Each reader found something in my words: hope, fear, love. I was just a girl in 1863, writing to survive. But my letters became a bridge, connecting hearts across time. They showed that words could outlive wars, distance, even death. Clara's family kept my story alive, their love a constant thread. The world changed, but my letters stayed true. They were my heart, shared with the future. I hope they'd inspire others to write, to connect, to endure. My voice, once small, now echoed forever. I was Eliza, and my letters were my legacy. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel for more tales of history and heart. Hit that button, and let's keep these stories alive together.